Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna devotees, accept my obeisances always to Prabhupada. Welcome devotees to our Bhagavad Gita circle this evening on a Wednesday. And we will be continuing from Bhagavad Gita chapter 2 verse 12 with His Grace Balabhadra Bhattacharya Prabhu from ISKCON Atlanta. Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Hare Krishna,
Accept my
Mataji.
obeisances to
My obeisances,
Prabhupada.
Prabhupada. Hari Bol.
Jai. You can roll with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gaudavana Pacharani Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschati Destarni Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Go Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Sorry about that. Let me turn this off. There we go. Chapter 2, text 12. Natvevaham jatu nasam natvam ne me janadipa nachaiva nabhavishama sarve vayamatapuram. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. Purport. In the Vedas, in the Katha Upanishad, as well as in the Swetashvatara Upanishad, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the maintainer of innumerable living entities in terms of their different situations according to individual work and reaction of work. That Supreme Personality of Godhead is also, by his plenary portions, alive in the heart of every living entity. Only saintly persons who can see within and without The same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. Nityo nityanam chaitanas chaitananam eko bahunam yo vidadati kamam tamatmastam yein upasanti dhiras tesham shantike shasvati netrisam. Katha 2:13. The same Vedic truth given to Arjuna is given to all persons in the world who pose themselves as very learned, but factually have but a poor fund of knowledge. The Lord says clearly that he himself, Arjuna, and all the kings who are assembled on the battlefield are eternally individual beings, and that the Lord is eternally the maintainer of the individual living entities, both in their condition and in their liberated situations. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is the supreme individual person, and Arjuna, the Lord's eternal associate, and all the kings assembled there are individual eternal persons. It is not that they did not exist as individuals in the past, and it is not that they will not remain eternal persons. Their individuality existed in the past, and their individuality will continue in the future without interruption. Therefore, there is no cause for lamentation for anyone. The Mayavadi theory that after liberation, the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya or illusion will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported herein by Lord Krishna, the supreme authority. Nor is the theory that we only think of individuality in the conditioned state supported herein. Krishna clearly says herein that in the future also the individuality of the Lord and others, as it is confirmed in the Upanishads, will continue eternally. This statement of Krishna's is authoritative because Krishna cannot be subject to illusion. If individuality were not a fact, then Krishna would not have stressed it so much, even for the future. The Mayavadi may argue that the individuality spoken of by Krishna is not spiritual, but material. Even accepting the argument that the individuality is material, then how can one distinguish Krishna's individuality? Krishna affirms his individuality in the past and confirms his individuality in the future also. He has confirmed his individuality in many ways, and impersonal Brahman has been declared to be subordinate to him. Krishna has maintained spiritual individuality all along. If he's accepted as an ordinary conditioned soul in individual consciousness, then his Bhagavad Gita has no value as authoritative scripture. A common man with all the four defects of human frailty is unable to teach that which is worth hearing. The Gita is above such literature. No mundane book compares with the Bhagavad Gita. When one accepts Krishna as an ordinary man, the Gita loses all importance. The Mayavadi argues that the plurality mentioned in this verse is conventional and that it refers to the body. But previous to this verse, such a bodily conception is already condemned. After condemning the bodily conception of the living entities, how was it possible for Krishna to place a conventional proposition on the body again? Therefore, individuality is maintained on spiritual grounds and is thus confirmed by great acharyas like Sri Ramanuja and others. It is clearly mentioned in many places in the Gita that this spiritual individuality is understood by those who are devotees of the Lord, those who are envious of Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, have no bona fide access to the great literature. The non-devotees' approach to the teachings of the Gita is something like that of a bee licking on a bottle of honey. One cannot have a taste of honey unless one opens the bottle. Similarly, the mysticism of the Bhagavad Gita can be understood only by devotees, and no one else can taste it, as it is stated in the 4th chapter of the book. Nor can the Gita be touched by persons who envy the very existence of the Lord. Therefore, the Mayavadi explanation of the Gita is a most misleading presentation of the whole truth. Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read commentations made by the Mayavadis and warns that one who takes to such an understanding of the Mayavadi philosophy loses all power to understand the real mystery of the Gita. If individuality refers to the empirical universe, then there is no need of teaching by the Lord. The plurality of the individual soul and the Lord is an eternal fact, and it is confirmed by the Vedas as above mentioned. Text number 13. Dehi nosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tata dehantara praptir tiras tatra namuyati. As the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Purport. Since every living entity is an individual soul, each is changing his body every moment, manifesting sometimes as a child, sometimes as a youth, and sometimes as an old man. Yet, the same spirit soul is there and does not undergo any change. This individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it is sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. Such changes of body account for varieties of enjoyment or suffering, according to one's work in life. So Bhishma and Drona, being noble souls, were surely going to have spiritual bodies in the next life, or at least life in heavenly bodies for superior enjoyment of material existence. So, in either case, there was no cause of lamentation. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the super soul, and nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober person. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. The Mayavadi theory of oneness of the spirit soul cannot be entertained on the ground that the spirit soul cannot be cut into pieces as a fragmental portion. Such cutting into different individual souls would make the supreme cleavable or changeable against the principle of the supreme soul being unchangeable. As confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the supreme exist eternally, sanatana, and are called shara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. These fragmental portions are eternally so. And even after liberation, the individual soul remains the same fragmental. But once liberated, he lives an eternal life in bliss and knowledge with the personality of Godhead. The theory of reflection can be applied to the supersoul, who is present in each and every individual body and is known as the Paramatma. He is different from the individual living entity. When the sky is reflected in water, the reflections represent both the sun and the moon and the stars also. The stars can be compared to the living entities and the sun or the moon to the Supreme Lord. The individual fragmental spirit soul is represented by Arjuna, and the Supreme Soul is the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. They are not on the same level, as it will be apparent in the beginning of the 4th chapter. If Arjuna is on the same level with Krishna, and Krishna is not superior to Arjuna, then their relationship of instructor and instructed becomes meaningless. If both of them are deluded by the illusory energy Maya, then there is no need of one being the instructor and the other the instructed. Such instruction would be useless because in the clutches of Maya, no one can be an authoritative instructor. Under the circumstances, it is admitted that Lord Krishna is the Supreme Lord, superior in position to the living entity, Arjuna, who is a forgetful soul deluded by Maya. Text 14. Matra sparshastu konteya stitoshna sukha dukada agama payino nityas tam titikshaswa bharata. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, oskayan of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. Purport. In the proper discharge of duty, one has to learn to tolerate non-permanent appearances and disappearances of happiness and distress. According to Vedic injunction, one has to take his bath early in the morning, even during the month of Magh, January, February. It is very cold at that time. But in spite of that, a man who abides by the religious principles does not hesitate to take his bath. Similarly, a woman does not hesitate to cook in the kitchen in the months of May and June, the hottest part of the summer season. One has to execute his duty in spite of climactic inconveniences. Similarly, to fight is the religious principle of the Kshatriyas. And although one has to fight with some friend or relative, one should not deviate from his prescribed duty. One has to follow the prescribed rules and regulations of religious principles in order to rise up to the platform of knowledge, because by knowledge and devotion only can one liberate himself from the clutches of Maya illusion. The two different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kaunteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, and to address him as Bharata signifies his greatness from his father's side. From both sides, he is supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. Text 15. Yamina vyavayantyete purusham purusharshava samaduka sukam dhiram somritav tvaya kalpate. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who is not disturbed by happiness and distress and is steady in both is certainly eligible for liberation. Purport. Anyone who is steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. In the Varnashram institution, the fourth stage of life, namely the renounced order sannyasa, is a painstaking situation, but one who is serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas order of life in spite of all difficulties. The difficulties usually arise from having to sever family relationships to give up the connection of wife and children. But if anyone is able to tolerate such difficulties, surely his path to spiritual realization is complete. Similarly, in Arjuna's discharge of duties as a Kshatriya, he is advised to persevere, even if it is difficult to fight with his family members or similarly beloved persons. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas at the age of 24, and his dependents, young wife as well as old mother, had no one else to look after them. Yet for a higher cause, he took sannyas and was steady in the discharge of higher duties. That is the way of achieving liberation from material bondage. Text 16. Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sata. Ubayor api drishtontas, tvanayos tattvadarshibhi. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they have concluded by studying the nature of both. Purport. There is no endurance of the changing body, that the body is changing every moment by the action and reactions of the different cells is admitted by modern medical science. And thus growth and old age are taking place in the body. But the spirit soul exists permanently, remaining the same despite all changes of the body and the mind. That is the difference between matter and spirit. By nature, the body is ever changing, and the soul is eternal. This conclusion is established by all classes of seers of the truth, both in personalist and personalist. In the Vishnu Purana 2:1238, it is stated that Vishnu and his abodes all have self-illuminated spiritual existence, Jyotimshi, Vishnur, Bhuvanam Vishnu. The words existent and non-existent refer only to the spirit and matter. That is the version of all seers of truth. This is the beginning of the instruction by the Lord to the living entities who are bewildered by the influence of ignorance. Removal of ignorance involves the reestablishment of the eternal relationship between the worshiper and the worshipable, and the consequent understanding of the difference between the part and parcel living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself. The difference between oneself and the Supreme Being, understood as a relationship between the part and the whole. Let me read that again. One can understand the nature of the Supreme by thorough study of oneself, the difference between oneself and the Supreme being understood as the relationship between the part and the whole. In the Vedanta Sutras, as well as in the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Supreme has been accepted as the origin of all emanations. Such emanations are experienced by superior and inferior natural sequences. The living entities belong to the superior nature, as it will be revealed in the 7th chapter. Although there is no difference between the energy and the energetic. The energetic is accepted as the supreme, and the energy or nature is accepted as the subordinate. The living entities, therefore, are always subordinate to the Supreme Lord, as in the case of the master and the servant, or the teacher and the taught. Such clear knowledge is impossible to understand under the spell of ignorance. And to drive away such ignorance, the Lord teaches the Bhagavad Gita for the enlightenment of all living entities for all times. So I'll stop there. See if we have any questions or comments.
Thank you so much, Prabhu, for such a nice reading.
Haribol.
Yeah, as you were reading, I was beginning to feel that it's so scientific,
Mm.
and I'm still trying to understand the science. It's so scientific.
Yeah.
Would like to ask devotees if any questions, any comments, any clarification, please do jump right in, or you can just raise your hand and we will call upon you. Prabhu, can you shed some light on transmigration of the soul? There is, I came across a couple of people that got a very interesting, not a clear understanding of the soul, the lack of a better word.
Mhm.
If you, so sometimes people think that, from the time they leave their body till the time they have what they call the Shraddha, like the 11 days or the 13 days, what have you. And after that, the soul takes another body, like right after that. And so can you shed some light on the journey of the soul, and not that it takes a new body right after that grieving period, lack of a better word? If you just shed some light on that.
Yeah, they don't take a body immediately unless, like Narada Muni, like flash of lightning, became a pure soul and took a spiritual body. But that's unique in history. The Pandavas they're going in their self-same bodies. That's also unique in history. All these things are very individual circumstances. In the 5th canto, it talks about this. In the 3rd canto, Lord Kapila Deva talks about this. There's several time frames. One is if a person's in a coma, the demigods are trying to decide, or Yamaraj is trying to decide what to do with that soul. They may stay in a coma for a week, month, year, whatever, until the decision is made, divvying up all their good and bad karmas. The normal sequence, according to the 5th canto, I believe it's like 6 months. Srila Prabhupada, I heard him recently talk about that. It's like this period of 6 months of, no consciousness, sleep, if, for lack of a better phrase. And then based on your karma, you get another body, whether it's going to be an animal body or human being's body. Like the confusion might be, well, if you're going to be a demigod, don't you just go straight up to become a demigod? I can't refer to that exactly, but this thing about the Shraddha ceremony, that's why Srila Prabhupada said it's not necessary for us to do that, not necessary for devotees to do that, because Krishna takes care of everything for us. That's why he says, Sarvadhamma Prichaja, Mamikam Saranambraja, Ham Tvam Sarva Papebhyo. He takes care of all that sinful reactions that we have. So the Shraddha ceremony is to help release the parent from that body because they may still have some attachment. And that attachment to that body will cause them to become a ghost. Prabhupada talked about George Harrison's, the house, I believe is the Bhaktivedanta Manor. He was talking about how when they first moved in, the house had a ghost. And that ghost was the man who used to own the house. And he stayed in that house as a ghost. And then Prabhupada said he became a dog and so many things. He wouldn't leave that house. So this Shraddha ceremony is to help us become relieved from this body, to help us go on, move on in our journey. But that journey in the 5th canto, I have to go back and look at the specific verses, but I believe it's about 6 months. Then there's the description of dragging the soul on that road, and the dogs are biting on him, and so many things are happening on that road, going to Yamaraj. So 5th canto is frightening. It's like a horror story. 21 different hells. And some of those hells are really frightening. I mean, the one where the bird is on the tree, because if you look at a person enviously, there's a hell for you. Watch out for envious eyes. So you look at the person enviously with those almost like a beak. And then that bird in hell, he's on the tree looking at you with his eyes and that long beak. And then all of a sudden he pounces on you and plucks out your eyes. And that happens over and over and over again, just because you were looking at people enviously. Very dangerous. It's like you said, it's scientific, right, Anasuya? It is very scientific. Every small thing is covered. There's nothing. Krishna knows everything, but Krishna's so amazing. Parasya Shaktir Vibhidaya Vasruyate Swabhaviki Jana Balakriyacha. He doesn't have to do all the work. It's all moving in sequence. He puts it into motion. And then by natural sequence, as mentioned also in one of the purpose we read, things are moving on. So your destination, yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tajanti hi kalevaram. Whatever you think of at the time of death, that you get. So suppose you're absorbed in being a devotee, absorbed in Krishna, then obviously you go to Krishna, but you don't go directly to Krishna. You go to the planet where Krishna's having his pastimes and you get trained up. In fact, before you leave the body, if you really are an advanced devotee and you get your siddha, you get your perfected spiritual existence, then the resident of Vrindavan comes to you, unbeknownst to anyone else, and starts to guide you, preparing you for leaving this body so you can go back to Krishna. So that's the science right there. It's not like you just leave the body, boom, you just go back to Godhead. Some rare cases, yes, but we need training. We've been here too long and too much baggage. So look at the science. A devotee whose experience comes to you in meditative state and trains you back up, then Prabhupada describes how you might be into the mood of the gopis or the cowherd boys. All that is revealed as you make spiritual progress. But you will never, like someone asked Prabhupada, different ways about who is he and what's his relationship with Krishna. He never said anything about it. Although Sasrup Maharaj points out that in one of Prabhupada's prayers, he points out that there's a small indication there. Because in that prayer, Srila Prabhupada says, I long to frolic with you in the cowherd pastures. So Sasrup Maharaj says that's almost like an indication that he's a cowherd boy, because not the cowherd girls, the cowherd boys, they frolicked in the pastures. So Sasrup Maharaj, he explained about that. So all of these things are part of the science of transmigration. So you mentioned about transmigration, not reincarnation. Transmigration. See, people are confused. Well, reincarnation, transmigration. No, soul is eternal. We just read that. Always the same. Doesn't change. Just moves from one body to the next. Dehi no sminyata dehe. So transmigration, so like transit system, I'm sure in Philadelphia, what do they call it? The PTA, whatever, Philadelphia Transit Authority, or whatever the names are. In Atlanta, we have another transit authority. New York has a different one. Transmigration, moving. So the soul is moving from boyhood, youth to old age. And then at death, when the body can no longer maintain the soul moves on to another body. There's a nice verse that comes up later in this chapter. So in conclusion, it's all based on your karma or your advancement in Krishna consciousness, how long it takes for you to go to the next body. Our goal is not to take another body. That's our goal. We want to go back home, back to Godhead, or like I said, go and be with Krishna in his pastimes, or be with our spiritual master serving Krishna. But those time frames are different based on your karma. That would be the proper way to look at it. But you can study it in more detail in the 5th canto. But you might get scared when you go there, because 5th canto is very, very heavy.
Then we better chant our rounds really good, Prabhu.
But also 5th canto is like, what is it? Not Pritu. Yeah, Pritu March. No, not Pritu March. Rishabdev. The story of Rishabdev is in the, it's so amazing. Jet Bharat, all this, such an amazing pastimes. Lord Rishabdev and his, how many sons? 100 sons? And he's giving them instructions. Oh, so many beautiful instructions. I think one time, Parikshit Prabhu, he was quoting one of those verses from the 5th canto. Parikshit, you remember that verse you like so much, 5th canto?
551.
551.
Tapo Divya Putraka.
Yes. Tapo Divyam Putraka Yena Sudye. Do you know the translation or loosely?
The first verse, Lord Vishnadev says, my dear sons, don't spend this very, very fortunate situation you have in this human body on the sense gratification that's available for hogs and dogs. You should spend the time in meditation, in serving the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Yes.
Tapodivya, divine tapasya.
Yes. Don't be a Vidbuja, right? Stool leader. Beautiful verses. So yes, 5th canto will help you. But again, it's not like cookie cutter. Everything's the same. There's no cookie cutter. It's all based on your own personal karma. You know, where you go in the next life and how long does it actually take. But generally, Srila Prabhupada says about 6 months. But you're not even conscious of that during that time. You're totally not aware of what's happening. But this thing about the Shraddha ceremony and the person attached to that body, that's the problem. That's why we do cremation. Because if we don't do cremation, then people hover over that body. They don't want to let go. People don't want to let go. And sometimes they can't even realize they're dead. So then the family members are duty bound to, first of all, do that Shraddha ceremony, but also do that cremation so that that body is not there. You know, like if you move out of your house and you've been there 30 years, you look back kind of like you don't want to leave. You know, it's like, you know, every corner of the house and, you know, you just have all these memories. Hey, come on, we got to go to the next house. Yeah, but. So that, but staying with this body. So as a devotee, we don't want to stay with this body. When it's time to go, I'm actually writing a song. It's called Time Waits for No Man When It's Time to Go. So there's no more time. It's up. It's done, you know. So anyway, any other questions, comments?
Thank you so much, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Any other comments, any other questions from devotees? I'm glad I answered this question.
I see Vishaka is all excited. I can feel the energy coming from him. I know you have something you want to share. Come on. You can do it.
Not exactly. I was just taking in the nectar from all the other devotees.
Thank you for being here. Any comment? Any thoughts?
Yes, Varsha. Oh, Prasad, go ahead, Prasad, Prabhu.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna, nice to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Prabhuji. Accept my humble obeisances and Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Prabhuji, on the 12th text, there is some reference to Mayavadi theory, which is sort of, a different path they suggest and kind of minimizes a little bit Bhagavad Gita and Krishna's effort to provide. Can you shed some light on that?
It's interesting. Right behind me, I have this book by Srila Prabhupada's Sannyas Guru, describing the whole history of this Mayavad philosophy. I'm just getting ready to start reading that. It's very detailed, amazing. So this Mayavad theory, as he says in the second paragraph, the Mayavad theory that after liberation, the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya or illusion will merge into the impersonal Brahman and lose its individual existence is not supported by Krishna. So that's the Mayavad theory, right? This, the individual soul separated by the covering of Maya. So they say everything is Maya. And when Krishna comes into this world, he's also Maya. That form that we see is Maya. So it's akin to the impersonal idea that the soul is, when it's liberated from the body, merges with the great soul, becomes one, merges. So this Maya body, their conclusion is everything is Maya. Your body is Maya, everyone's body is Maya, everything is Maya. The difference is that nothing is, all the energy is called Daivyesha Gunamayi. That means divine energy. You understand? Daivyesha Gunamayi. So this Gunamaya, it's all divine, right? Arjuna, when he was hesitating to fight, was in Mahamaya. But that same Maya, when Arjuna agreed to surrender to Krishna, became Yoga Maya. Same Maya. No difference. Like the energy that runs your heater and the energy that runs your cooler, it's the same energy. So that Maya, guess what? Maya, that energy is eternal. Prakriti, right? There's only 5 subject matters in Bhagavad Gita. Who knows? 5 subject matters. Ishwar, Jiva, Karma, Prakriti, and time. Karma, Prakriti, time, color. So of the 5, there's only one that's temporary or whatever. That's called karma. Karma is temporary. There's no karma in the spiritual world, but there is time. There is energy. There's a jiva and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So the energy, which they call Maya, which we also sometimes call Maya, is divine energy being used in different ways. That's why the living being is called the, what is our definition? Marginal. We are marginal, sometimes affected by the material manifestation of the energy and sometimes affected by the spiritual manifestation of the energy. But the Mayavadis, they don't understand the eternal existence of the soul. That's why this verse, and Srila Prabhupada is referring to the Mayavadis in reference to this verse, the Tvayavaham Jatu Nasam, Aham Neme Janadipa. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you nor all these kings. Mayavadis don't go for that. They don't understand that. So I hope that makes sense, that they say everything is Maya. Krishna, when he comes to this world, is Maya, because they cannot understand the transcendental nature of Krishna's body. Neither can they understand the individual nature of the spirit soul. That's why in this purport, which you referred to, so many references to the individuality of the soul. Now, in the future, in the past, that individuality doesn't go anywhere. But the Mayavadis they don't have that same conclusion. But as I said, I'm just getting ready to read a really nice book about the history of this Mayavad philosophy. Maybe I can share more the next time with you.
Sure. Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
If you want Prasad Prabhu, I can, if that's okay with Balabhadra Prabhu,
Yes.
I can give you his contact
Sure.
and
Absolutely.
then his email, and you can reach out to him. And he can share a lot more with you. I reach out to Balabhadra Prabhu myself quite a bit. I bug him quite a bit.
Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you. And that was a very nice question. Thank you. That's why I'm so happy that we have this discussion. We have the circle that we can always ask questions.
Absolutely.
Get a much, much better understanding. Thank you. Any other questions from devotees? Okay, if there isn't, Balabhadra Prabhu, as usual, thank you so much for this wonder reading. Thank you for the discussion. Vanchaka. And just a quick reminder, tomorrow morning's class is by Chandramali Swami. It's at 7 o'clock. Yeah, because he's in Slovenia. So don't forget, it's 7 a.m. tomorrow morning by Chandramali Swami. Until then, have a wonderful evening. Vanchakaptibhyascha
Kripasin Vevata Patitanam Pamebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo.
Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada
Prabhupada
ki
ki
jai.
jai. Take care, everybody. Haribol.
Haribol. Thank you, Balabhadra Prabhu.
Thank you, Manji. Haribol.
Hare Krishna.